filtering in, we're going to go ahead and kick this off. Thanks for showing up and being here on the Virtual Propane Expo. You know, the whole purpose of this expo is really just to serve the industry. There are about 10 normal propane expos that take place across North America. Listing them off really quick: National Propane Expo, Western Propane Expo, New England Propane Expo, the Mid-Atlantic, the Mid-States, the Texas, the southeastern, like the South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida Expo, and there's one that's usually out in the western part. There's the Propane Canada Expo, and then the World Propane Expo. There's others that I'm probably missing. Sorry if I didn't mention it. A lot of these are going to, hopefully, everyone will be back in full swing next year. But to serve the industry and help get the thought leaders' ideas that are leading our industry out to all of us that run propane companies, to help the vendors serve you, the marketers, and the marketers, you receive the information you need. Just built this and set it up really fast. It's almost like a nonprofit, just rolling it out there to help the industry out. We do have over about 240 exhibitors now. Believe it or not, that's more exhibitors than any other expo in the world for propane. It's pretty cool. So a lot of the exhibitors involved in this. A lot of sponsors are really making this happen, essentially supporting this so that we as an industry can move forward and really serve the industry. There are a lot of other exhibitors. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And then for those of us that are joining today, obviously the current presenters here and the past presenters. So everything we're going to do in this particular presentation will be recorded. So as we listen to it, you can then share it with other people. So thanks again for being here. So today we have a really special guest, and it's Stuart Weidie. I know he really doesn't need a lot of introduction, but I'm going to start anyway. You know, I met Stuart actually at a Michigan summer convention. Obviously, former past president of NPGA, CEO of Blasman Gas, president of, make sure I get this right, the Alliance AutoGas company, as well as the National AutoGas Fueling and Vehicle Network. And you know, his company is really leading in the area and trying to serve our entire industry in the area of autogas. And so, you know, there's no better company to come on board and explain what are some of the opportunities, what's going on in the marketplace, what do we see out there as far as autogas, as far as opportunities, and how to address that, and how is the whole COVID thing affecting things, and you know, how can we take advantage of that opportunity? So Stuart, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and put your presentation on the screen so everyone can see it, and we'll get rolling.
Okay, well, Bill, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with everyone, and those who are watching now and those who may watch it on a recorded basis. But I think this is a good idea, and currently in the situation we're all in, where there's not as much travel and gatherings together, we still need to stay connected. It's important that we stay connected. I'm going to start talking briefly about renewable propane, and I think it's important to put some context around that. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'm going to answer the question of why is renewable propane important and why does it matter right up front. And I'll tell you why. It's because despite what you read, despite what the media tells you, despite what Wall Street is telling you, despite what policymakers and politicians are telling you, the internal combustion engine is not dead, nor is it going to be dead into the future, at least for the next 40 years. The electrification of everything has just got too many challenges, which I'll reference some of them here right now. And it's important that we use renewable liquid fuels to go into those internal combustion engines in the transportation sector. It's going to allow us to meet a lot of the emissions goals that we have. Now, for context reasons, I think it's important we start thinking about renewable propane. But the most important point I want to make today is we have got to create more demand for propane autogas in the United States in order to encourage people who are currently making renewable diesel to, in addition to that, make renewable propane. We can't go out and promote renewable propane right now. There's not enough of it being made currently, but that doesn't mean if the demand increases, renewable propane will make its way to the marketplace. So I think there's important to consider there are multiple options that need to be pursued in order to make improvements in the transportation sector emissions that should improve climate issues, should improve health issues, should improve air quality. But one of the things that's being promoted almost exclusively by billionaires and by politicians is that electrification is the answer to everything. And I put this slide up there because it shows one of the biggest flaws and fallacies of electrification, which is the fact that only 32% of the energy that goes into a power plant gets to the plug. And therefore, I think conservation is something that we should bring into the conversation, particularly in the propane industry. When we use our energy source, propane, and put it into a home or a business or a vehicle, we're getting a tremendous amount of efficiency, 75 to 85% efficiency. And with some products, up to over 95% efficiency. Think of a tankless water heater. So why would we only take an energy source and get 32% of it? So we need to conserve. We need to be good stewards of the Earth's resources. And the direct use of natural gas and propane and AutoGas into applications makes a lot of sense if we care about the conservation, conserving the Earth's resources. I'll give you another thing that's about to happen. You're going to start hearing about it, which is that hydrogen is the future. Once people figure out the issues with electrification, they're going to say, well, we need to go to hydrogen. But here's hydrogen's problem. It takes 14 units of energy, generally methane, natural gas, to make 1 unit of hydrogen. That doesn't make any sense. 14 units of energy to make 1 unit of hydrogen. That is the antithesis of conservation. So again, I think it's important that we use the gaseous fuels that we have and bring renewables into our mix to really reduce carbon intensity. So here's the biggest issue with electric batteries, the EV vehicle. They weigh 1,000 pounds more. It takes 500,000 pounds of raw materials in their processing in order to produce 1 electric vehicle battery. The Republic of Congo, an African country, produces 70% of the world's cobalt, and China controls 90% of the cobalt refining. I don't think that's good for our national security. Very few people know this and understand it, nor do people that do know this want it to be revealed. So I think we need to look at the material issues and current battery material technology. In fact, the head of Tesla battery technology recently left the company. He was with Elon Musk when they started at the very beginning. And he recently left because he realized there aren't enough materials to make the electric batteries. I mean, there are only 7.2 million electric vehicles in the entire globe right now. There's over 28 million propane AutoGas vehicles. We've got almost 4 times as many vehicles on propane as there are electricity, or EVs. And so it's primarily due to the cost, how electric battery materials are mined, and the quantity that's available. They can't scale anymore. It's just going to be a really challenging thing. So maybe EVs, they will have a part in the mix. Propane and renewable fuels have a part, and other methods as well. But we don't have a one-size-fits-all EV battery future in the United States, nor in the rest of the world. So people say, well, electricity is going to be all produced by renewables. And you say, well, what does renewable mean? Well, wind and solar. If you want 1 wind turbine, it's 900 tons of steel, 2,500 tons of concrete. And by the way, concrete is in the top 3 carbon emitting things that man does. And 45 tons of non-recyclable plastic. These things just don't get popped up in the middle of a prairie or on a farm in farmland without having a lot going into them. And then there's issues with them getting into a dump. So they may be clean, but they're also intermittent sources of electricity. We still need other sources. And one of the great ironies, I think, of our political system right now and what policymakers, the one carbon-free source of power that we could have in this country is nuclear. But environmentalists and a lot of policymakers are against nuclear, which is the cleanest source of power that we've got. But wind turbines have their own issues, and that's just the point of this right here. This is an interesting chart. There are 103 quadrillion BTUs of energy consumed in the United States. Wind and solar produce only 3.7 quadrillion BTUs. So we're right at 3.5% with wind and solar. it's very small part of the energy grid for electricity in the United States. And in fact, total consumption is growing faster than the expansion of wind and solar. Now, solar's got a good story to tell in many cases, particularly when it's on site. But to think that we're going to have wind and solar producing all of our electricity, and then we're having electric vehicles is not feasible, it's not scalable, and it's not going to happen in the next 40 years, which is why internal combustion engines are going to be important for the next 40 years. So carbon intensity, and this information comes from California Air Resources Board when they developed their low carbon fuel standard. But carbon intensity is a measure of the carbon. And I want to point out, first of all, that an electric vehicle, the EV, which is the third from the right, is scored by California at approximately a carbon intensity of 52. Renewable LPG, which is something that we want to talk about and we'll get to in a moment, is right at 22.2. So it's less than half of the carbon intensity. And propane coming from natural gas is 79. So even if you blended 30% of renewable LPG in with 70% of fossil propane coming from natural gas, we're in the 50s, which is about the same carbon intensity as electric vehicle. So carbon intensity is something that we need to consider. Of course, if we could have enough production to have 100% renewable LPG or AutoGas going into vehicles, we would have less than half of an electric vehicle in the carbon intensity. But even if we blend it 70 fossil propane, 30% renewable, we're still in the 50s, about the equivalent of an electric vehicle in terms of its carbon intensity. Here's another important point. A vehicle today using an internal combustion engine emits 99% fewer emissions than a vehicle in 1970. 99% fewer emissions than a vehicle from 50 years ago. And why is that important? It's because advancements are being made every single day, every single week, month, and year in internal combustion technology that goes into vehicles. And this is a simple one. I'm not sure people really understand this transition that's taking place, but a port injection petrol or gasoline engine, if you took a port injection propane engine, you reduce the CO2 emissions by 12%. But today, the new engines are being produced with direct injection technology. Not all of them, but a great majority of the transition is happening very swiftly. And if you took a direct injection engine, for example, a 3.3 liter Ford F-150 pickup truck right now, it's got a direct injection engine in it. But if you took a port injection Ford from 5 years ago and compared it to a current 3.3 liter or 5.0 liter F-150, there's 32% less CO2 emissions. That's a dramatic improvement. And vehicle technology will continue to make improvements through the use of turbocharging and other methods. So engine technology advancements are really critical to help us meet our emissions goal in this country, because they're going to be more prolific than electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles. One thing I want to mention here, renewable propane has a molecular structure that's identical to fossil propane. So you can have it as 100% drop-in fuel, and that's relevant because if you look at the CO2 reductions on 32% versus a port injection petrol engine, and you get some renewable propane in there, you're getting a 60% reduction in CO2 emissions compared to a regular gasoline F-150 from 5 years ago. So RHD, and I'm going to try to keep this fairly simple, but RHD is essentially renewable diesel. The propane that's being produced, the renewable propane being produced in the United States right now, is a byproduct from a renewable diesel plant. And there are a lot of renewable diesel plants around the country. But RHD Basics, the hydrocarbons, which are molecules consisting of carbon and hydrogen, LPG or propane is C3H8. There's your 3 carbons and 8 hydrogens. And hydrotreating, that is reacting molecules with hydrogen to remove atoms other than the hydrogen or the carbon. So the term which I stumble over frequently is hydrodeoxygenation. So that's when oxygen is removed, and the side effect is you have these double bonds. And the other part of this process is isomerization, which is a process that rearranges the structures of the molecules without adding or removing atoms from the molecules. So that's a really broad overview about how things are converted, materials, feedstocks are converted to make propane or diesel. Okay, renewable hydrocarbon diesel is a hydrocarbon-only diesel fuel made by hydrotreating fats and oils, corn oil, waste materials, animal fats, and plant oils are the feedstocks for renewable hydrocarbon diesel. And there's such thing as renewable naphtha, which is a hydrocarbon-only gasoline blend stock. And then another byproduct, which is, of course, is what in the propane industry we have great interest in, is renewable LPG, which is a co-product from an RHD production process. And what I want to say is there's today only one renewable diesel refining facility in the United States that has made what I would say is a very reasonable incremental investment to produce propane. And that is primarily because there's not much awareness that renewable propane is something that we need in this country, which I think goes back to the earlier point of we need to state that renewable and fossil LPG, AutoGas, is an important part of our transportation future, and we need to create demand. So there's a couple of ways, hydrotreating examples, you're turning glycerol into propane. I won't get into how the molecular structure is changed, but the hydrotreating process does it. From that process, out of a refinery, you take just like you do, you move propane, renewable propane around the country. These are simply slides of the infrastructure networks that we have. 75,000 miles of propane infrastructure. You can drop it right in line. You can move it by rail car to a facility if you want to keep it completely separate rather than blending it in. But the way the credits work from the federal government on utilization of RINs credits is that you just document that it went from the refinery making propane into a transport, into a rail car shipped to Maryland or Delaware, unloaded, and goes through a meter into a vehicle. You have to document that chain of custody that the propane went into that vehicle. It doesn't necessarily have to be the exact molecule. You can do that if you keep it completely separate, but it can be blended in. You just have to show that the renewable propane went into the system. Again, another example, there's a transloader, takes the product from the transport truck, 10,000 gallons, whatever, puts it in the rail car, ships it anywhere you want to go in the country. A couple of things about Alliance AutoGas that I want to mention. We have undergone a rigorous testing process to meet all the EPA certifications. We have the largest portfolio of EPA certified conversion systems in the United States of America at Alliance AutoGas. And one of the great things that I'm very proud of the progress that's been made over the last 4 to 5 years is we have a plug-and-play system where there's only 3 plugs that you put into the OEM plugs. There's no cutting, splicing, whatever. We've created this plug-and-play system that is really foolproof in the installation process. And we have an industry-leading 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty on our systems that we've honored. This is just something I want to mention. That's an F750 running on the Alliance AutoGas propane system, 6.8 liter. Of course, Ford F6 and 750s have gone to the 7.3 liter. So 550, 650, 750 are now 7.3 liter engines. But we have 88 of those trucks and 145 class 3 to 5 trucks in our company at Blossman and 150 passenger type vehicles. Our company alone last year saved $1.4 million in fuel. Important point, the cost of operation of the class 7 trucks, our bobtails that are running on the F750s, they work great with a 3,000 gallon barrel or less. If you have 32 or 3,400 gallon barrels, or you operate in very, very extreme mountainous areas, maybe the F750 is not going to work for you. But we're hoping that over the next couple of years to 7.3. But if you look at the 45 cents per mile cost, that's all in maintenance, fuel, and everything for our AutoGas bobtail trucks versus our 73 cents per mile for the trucks using diesel. Now, what we're experiencing is there's a great transition away from diesel. People have had it. All the after treatment work, the $5,000 every time something breaks, the maintenance cost associated with diesel trucks, it's out of control. We're becoming an AutoGas market, and here in the United States, I think, much more closely monitored as an option or an advancement on a diesel engine because of the fuel cost savings, but also the maintenance costs. And there's something that's critically important. Uptime is relevant. Uptime means you're not having to sit and wait for a truck for 3 to 5 days, and you're losing, 3,000 gallons or 5,000 gallons in deliveries a day. You can't afford to do that in a propane business. Just to summarize everything, it's up to us in the propane industry to create more demand for the AutoGas vehicles and for transportation. It will attract people willing to make, refiners willing to make investments in not just renewable diesel, but will make renewable propane, which will increase the supply, which will allow our industry, using a drop-in renewable fuel blended in with some fossil, to make a significant contribution in reducing carbon emissions in this country. It's not a technical challenge, it's a market commercial challenge that has to be met. So we can do our part in our industry by converting more of our own vehicles, moving the diesel vehicles out that are becoming increasingly expensive. And I think that the important thing to understand is the internal combustion engine is not going away, despite what you read here and say, and what politicians say. There's billions of dollars being invested in electric vehicles. Of course, there's going to be nothing but media attention associated with that. But again, 28 million global propane AutoGas vehicles and 7 million electric vehicles. There's a reason. It's because propane makes a lot more sense. So I guess we'll leave it at that, and maybe some Q&A.
Okay, so first could you repeat again how many trucks are running on propane versus electric?
Yes, as I mentioned, vehicles, in terms of globally, there are 28 million propane AutoGas vehicles. And currently in the entire world, there's 7.2 million electric vehicles. Now, if you listen to stock market analysts or the media, you would think there's 700 million electric vehicles. There's only 7.2 million out there. And that's their fundamental problem. The battery materials required to make an EV run are not there. They don't exist in a sufficient quantity for scalability to happen. Now, of course, there are going to be advancements in battery materials, but they're not going to happen overnight. People have been spending lots of money on that for decades.
Okay, and it looks like you said there's 45 cents per mile cost all in for a bobtail as compared to 73 cents per mile on a diesel type bobtail. Is that right?
That is the actual data from Blossman's fleet of propane delivery vehicles. So we did a comparison on the all-in cost per mile for our propane AutoGas F750 bobtails compared to those diesels that we have in our fleet that we're transitioning every year as we buy new vehicles out of the fleet.
Okay. Along those lines, do you have any numbers on number of natural gas vehicles or the cost for natural gas? Because I think we all have heard how much more it costs to build a natural gas plant than a propane plant, or to build the tanks to be able to receive, to hold natural gas on a vehicle. It's more difficult. It's more costly, right? What sort of numbers or figures or thoughts do you have along the lines of natural gas versus propane?
Well, first of all, a conversion for a natural gas vehicle, because you're running at 3,500 PSI, not 250 PSI with the tanks that go on the vehicle. Much, much more expensive. But let's just say you have a $7,000 propane conversion. That is going to be over $25,000 to get it to run on natural gas. The other thing that's particularly important is we can put for $50,000 propane AutoGas refueling infrastructure for 100 or 400 vehicles, and the equivalent would cost $2 to $2.5 million for CNG because of all the compressors and the equipment associated with it. So we can put in over 20 propane dispensing infrastructures for every one natural gas. That allows us to scale faster. I think that's an important consideration that's often overlooked. Now, natural gas has its role. The energy content and the energy density of natural gas is about 35% less than propane. It's got its role in municipal urban areas on small fixed routes. That's going to be a place where natural gas works. Again, so we need some EVs, we need propane AutoGas, we need natural CNG, and in some cases LNG, but that's a little iffy. But the cost associated with the natural gas is considerably higher than propane.
Okay, so it's a 20-to-1 ratio for refueling stations, 2 to 2.5 million as compared to about 50,000 for a refueling station, right?
That's correct. And if you put a large, 18,000 gallon tank for propane refuel, and of course you can be 150 plus, but still, even if you use that number, it's 12 to 15 times as for every one CNG station.
Okay, so when you're talking the 20-to-1, are you looking at just a couple 1,000 gallon tanks in that equation?
Yeah, exactly. One, a couple thousands in there, and you can run a lot of gas through those two 1,000s if it's being run through year round, 365, 7 days a year.
So along those lines, when people are thinking about an ROI on something like that, what are, of course, it varies depending on where you're at, and what is the range you're seeing for how much fuel, how much propane could a marketer sell through some of these two 1,000 gallon tanks connected to a refueling station for propane? What could they expect on something like that?
Well, I mean, it's a simple math thing. If you only go once a week, you're running 50,000 gallons roughly through it. If you go twice a week and make deliveries, you can run 100,000 gallons through one dispenser. So there's a great return on investment for a propane marketer who's to provide that refueling infrastructure for a customer or in a community if they're getting that type of volume going through it. So if you have on average 2,500 gallons, which is low for we're having more success with people who are driving considerably more miles because they're using 7,000, 8,000. But if you had 40 vehicles at 2,500 gallons each, that's 100,000 gallons you can put through your $50,000 or $60,000 investment. Great return on investment. There's nothing else in the propane industry that gets a better return than that. Did I know?
Yeah, see, that's really important to know because you run lots of operations. You've done the ROI on refilling stations as compared to 1,000 gallon tanks at houses. There's a different ROI on each installation. Of course, there's an average we can expect for usage from different types of usages, but that's a critical thing. Thanks for sharing that. That's really an insight. So here's a question. Is anyone currently producing renewable propane at a commercial level in the United States?
Yes, there's a company called the Renewable Energy Group, and our company at Alliance AutoGas has taken that product from a refinery in Louisiana, and we're shipping it for Blossman customers to Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, but we're also shipping some of that product to California, Oregon, and Washington State, who have very lucrative incentive programs for renewable liquid fuels out there. So we're handling those logistics and moving out, but I think that's the point. We need to be very careful. We don't need to go out and start waving the flag about renewable propane everywhere. We need to create more demand. We need to go find those 40 vehicles in a community. And granted, it's been hard and slow. For the last 5 years, we've been dealing with gasoline or petrol prices below $2 a gallon in some places, where we might be $1.30 or $1.40 per gallon, still a tremendous savings, but there's not a pain point right now. So we need to create that demand, and it's a very small incremental investment for a renewable diesel plant to put a process on the backside of it to create propane. So that plant in Louisiana is around roughly 4 to 5 million gallons annually. Very modest amount.
All right. Stuart, you touched on something that was really interesting, I think, to a lot of us that run propane companies, where the diesel bobtails, there has been some bad experiences with them, right? And you touched on there's sometimes downtime. Sometimes we feel like we need extra additional trucks, spare trucks. Spare trucks cost money. They're not free. With insurance on them, maintenance, and et cetera. And so we feel like we need more spares than we need with propane. Can you tell us a little bit more about what sort of savings you expect to see from having this type of a propane fueled fleet?
Well, I think on the fuel alone, it's 30%. It's pretty consistent. That's in the last 5 years. Prior to that, there was considerably more savings on the fuel because we were at $2.50, $3, etc., and propane was below $2. But again, one of the things that's emerging as a positive trend is the after treatment equipment on diesel vehicles is getting so expensive, not just on an upfront basis for the cost, but to maintain it. And then when it goes down, you have to repair it and fix it, and it's just a costly endeavor. And that's the trend. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with a large national company that everybody would know, huge. And he was sharing his frustrations with diesel, and I won't use the terms that he said, but he was saying he's extremely frustrated with the diesel maintenance cost on the after treatment equipment that's mandated now by our government. So that's creating an opportunity for propane, for AutoGas to become an option. And by the way, I don't want to call propane an alternative fuel anymore. I think we should call it an advanced fuel. Advanced fuel sounds a lot better than alternative fuel to me because advanced implies it's got a future. There's going to be opportunities in the future. And I think there will be when people start to realize the benefits and the realistic possibilities when you have propane AutoGas going into particular commercial vehicle. But I think the after treatment maintenance costs are increasingly an issue for a lot of fleet managers and companies.
So one question from the marketers, Stuart, is you said maybe the place we should start is let's rename it to advanced fuels. And there's in addition to what you said, I think you also mentioned that it's cleaner, so you don't need as much maintenance on the vehicles. I think you mentioned there's a maintenance reduced cost in R&M, probably because it's just cleaner and there's less oil change. You mentioned that. So when it comes to finding these 40 customers to start using propane AutoGas from us, what are some things that you're seeing that you might recommend to the propane marketers out there for them to do?
Well, I see a very clear chain. I'm not clairvoyant, but I'll be surprised if this chain doesn't make sense to most everybody that's attending here today. And I'm going to go back to where I started. Our propane industry has tried to put propane on their vehicles, and many people have had bad experiences. They feel like they have been burned. There are two companies, Alliance AutoGas being one of them, that have a legitimate equipment that will run your vehicles reliably on propane AutoGas. And so I see this chain being, we need as an industry to put it on our vehicles first. It's astonishing to me that people are buying diesels. It's astonishing to me that people aren't realizing the cost savings. And it's astonishing to me that people are dealing with the maintenance issues and downtime with diesel vehicles in their fleet. Now, our industry and PERC is investing in having additional options for propane bobtails. But today, we can put everything from a F750, 650 down to 150. We can do the whole Chevy line. We can, all the managers' trucks, the owners' vehicles, the service trucks. So we need to adopt it. Then we build our confidence in the equipment that makes the vehicles run on propane. And then it makes it a lot easier to go out and sell it to somebody in your local community because you have confidence in it and trust it. So I think that's what we need to focus on as an industry. Get our own folks and our companies to adopt it so we have confidence to go out and sell it and promote it to those outside of our industry. And I think when that happens, we'll start to create additional demand, which means we can then legitimately go to renewable diesel refiners and say, why don't you make that small incremental investment to produce renewable propane? We'll take every drop of it. And in fact, if we grow the market from, until we have 3.5 million vehicles, and we've got 200,000 right now, roughly, until we have 3.5 million vehicles running on propane, I don't think we should be satisfied. If we had 3.5 million today, there would be people out building renewable propane or LPG refineries, not renewable diesel. So we use it ourselves. We go have confidence to create the additional demand. we'll see more renewable liquid fuels of LPG come into the marketplace.
You know, there's a big change going on in our country for looking for ways to run vehicles differently. Obviously, you mentioned EVs, but the costs for the EVs as compared to the costs for the propane really seems like it's an intriguing and exciting opportunity, especially compare propane versus natural gas. If you would take just 30 seconds to explain that, what is the difference between Alliance AutoGas and Blossman? How, because we're talking about Alliance AutoGas and what you're doing there. However, you use some stats from a real propane company, which I really appreciate you disclosing that and being transparent about that. It's really helpful. But if you could just tell us a little bit about Alliance, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, because we confuse everybody, which is too bad for us. We shouldn't do that. So Blossman Gas has been around since 1951. We operate in 15 states as a retail propane company with 72 locations and 180,000 customers. In 2010, we started another company, a sister company, if you will, called Alliance AutoGas. Currently, we have over 80 propane marketers and Blossman that provide refueling infrastructure and fuel supply to fleets around the country. So there are 46 states that Alliance AutoGas operates in. And we have our own conversion systems and refueling systems in addition to providing the fuel supply. So Alliance AutoGas is really focused on the promotion and the growth of autogas in the United States of America. Blossman has engineers that do a lot of that work to create the systems for Alliance AutoGas to go out and sell and promote. But they're sister companies, but Alliance AutoGas has over 83 fellow propane companies in it. We have over 100 installation centers and many more service centers, because you got to keep the vehicles on the road. Those are all the things under the Alliance AutoGas umbrella.
Awesome. So if anybody is a propane marketer, they're looking at getting into this, then the Alliance AutoGas is a home for, you said 83 propane companies that are involved in this, in both the infrastructure, the service stations, and really sharing some of the engineering ideas and thoughts and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, and you can go to our site, allianceautogas.com, and there's our phone number on there. We'd love to speak with you. If you want to reach out electronically to us, we'll respond. But one of the things that we'll do, let's say you're a propane marketer and you want to do 2 or 5, and you've got somebody that works on your vehicles, we will come in and train the people that work on your vehicles currently to do the installations and to do the maintenance on your propane vehicles as a marketer. Or in some cases, there will be somebody we already have set up or established in that area that is an Alliance AutoGas installation and service center. So there are multiple methods that we approach this, but our training for the service and maintenance centers is very extensive, very detailed, and we have, that's been something we've been working on for the last 5 years with great vigor, because you can't just sell the things and be done with it and wash your hands. You've got to keep the vehicles running on the road, and we've taken that as serious as anybody. And while we haven't seen the expansion and the explosive growth in vehicle conversions that we had hoped for a variety of reasons, we are prepared with the number of service centers that we've got to scale up very swiftly, and we feel very good about that. And I'm very proud of the network of that we've established around the country in 46 states.
Great. Well, when you consider the problems that diesel vehicles are having, you consider the cost savings for the propane, consider that we already have the fuel here, consider that we're all looking for ways to increase our gallons. There's a really compelling story there. Stuart, maybe we should consider having you on again. It'd be great to have you on again, because especially there's so much, like you said, in the news and stuff about whether it's electricity or natural gas as a fuel source. When we in our industry know, hey, this propane it's American made, it's plentiful, it's cheaper, it's cleaner, it's better from so many perspectives. I love the fact you can really reduce so many other costs too, like the maintenance and extra down the road costs. So thanks a lot for being here. Really appreciate you sharing not only your the insights into this, but also real life data that you've experienced in your company. So thanks, Stuart. If you want to get in touch with Stuart and his company, it's Alliance AutoGas. Go to the Virtual Propane Expo, and you can type it into the exhibitors. You can go right to their exhibitor booth. There's buttons there you can click on, and you can check out and see exactly more details about Alliance AutoGas, and it will also link you right over to them, as well as this video will be recorded, cleaned up, edited, and then put onto this site so that you can share this video with other people that might not have been able to make it to the show today. So thanks again, Stuart. Really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.